It was a bright Tuesday morning when Sarah Turner set out for her usual walk. The sun was shining down on the park, making everything look peaceful and calm. Birds were chirping in the trees, and the flowers in the garden were starting to bloom, showing off their pretty colors. Sarah's cane tapped gently against the sidewalk with each step she took. Most people might have looked at her and seen just a blind woman, walking alone in the park. She wore dark sunglasses and carried her cane to help her walk, just like she did every day. It was a routine she had grown used to. But if you looked closely, you would see something else. You would notice the large, strong dog walking beside her, moving quietly and confidently, his muscles rippling under his fur. This dog wasn't just any dog. His name was Rex, and he was not like other guide dogs. Rex was a German Shepherd, big and powerful, with a deep, knowing look in his eyes. He walked by Sarah's side, guiding her, protecting her, and keeping her safe. But there was more to Rex than met the eye. Rex wasn't just a guide dog. He had a special past, one that no one in the park that morning knew about. If they did, they would have treated Sarah and Rex very differently. People would have respected them more, and they would have known better than to mess with them. But no one knew the truth yet. And Sarah didn't feel the need to tell anyone. She wasn't interested in bragging about her dog's past. She was just going about her day, enjoying her walk. The park was quiet, just like most mornings. Sarah enjoyed these walks. They gave her time to think, to clear her mind, and to feel the fresh air. But today, things felt a little different. As Sarah walked along the path, she noticed a group of bikers up ahead. They were sitting on their motorcycles, talking and laughing loudly. Sarah didn't know them, but she could tell that they weren't paying attention to her. They were laughing and joking, but she could feel their eyes on her as she approached. The closer she got, the more she felt their stares. "Look at that," one of the bikers said in a voice Sarah couldn't hear clearly, but she could tell it was meant to be loud. "What's she doing out here alone? She looks lost." Sarah didn't stop. She didn't respond. She knew they were making fun of her, but she had heard that kind of talk before. People often made fun of her because she was blind. They didn't understand her, or the bond she had with Rex. They didn't know that she wasn't just a blind woman walking down the street. She was someone with a history, someone who had faced hard challenges in life. And so had Rex. The bikers didn't know this, of course. They just saw her cane, her sunglasses, and her dog. They didn't know that Rex had been trained for something much more serious than just being a guide dog. Rex had been trained in a way that most dogs could never dream of. He wasn't just any dog, he was a retired Navy SEAL K9. He had been through some of the toughest training a dog could face, and he had served in dangerous missions overseas. His skills were sharp, and his loyalty to Sarah was stronger than anything anyone could imagine. But none of that mattered to the bikers. To them, she was just a blind woman, and her dog was just a dog. They didn't know what Rex was capable of, and they didn't care. They probably thought it would be fun to mess with her. As Sarah got closer, she could hear the laughter growing louder. She could tell they were getting ready to make their move. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to make a big mistake. Rex could sense the change in the air. His ears twitched, his head turned slightly, and he slowed down just enough to stay alert. Sarah, too, could feel it. It was a small change, but it was there. It was as if the air had gotten thicker, heavier. She didn't need to see it to know what was coming. The group of bikers began to approach her. They weren't trying to hide their intentions anymore. One of them, the leader of the group, stepped forward. He was tall and muscular, wearing a leather jacket that had patches on it. His friends behind him were laughing, their eyes focused on Sarah. They thought it would be funny to mess with her, maybe even scare her a little. They didn't realize that Sarah wasn't the kind of person they could scare. "Hey, lady," the leader called out, his voice loud and taunting. "What are you doing out here all by yourself? You lost or something?" Sarah didn't respond. She didn't need to. She could feel the anger rising in the air, and she knew that Rex was ready. He was always ready. His body was tense, his eyes never leaving the group of bikers. Sarah knew that Rex would protect her if things went too far. She had faith in him, just as he had faith in her. The leader of the bikers stepped closer, grinning at her. "What's wrong? You can't hear us, can you? You can't even see us. What's your dog gonna do? Bark at us?" He laughed, his friends joined in, but the sound didn't reach Sarah. She could feel the tension, but she didn't flinch. She didn't give them the satisfaction of showing fear. What they didn't know was that Rex wasn't just a dog who followed orders. He had been trained to sense danger, to react quickly, and to protect those he cared about. He was more than just a guide dog, he was a warrior. A retired Navy SEAL K9, with a past that made him one of the most skilled dogs alive. He didn't just bark when threatened. No, Rex was ready to take action. And so, as the group of bikers moved in closer, Sarah remained calm, her hand resting gently on the harness of Rex. She wasn't worried. She knew Rex had everything under control. The bikers didn't know what was coming, but Sarah and Rex did. Before we dive any deeper into the story, where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment below and let me know what you think about what's happening so far. What do you think will happen next? Could Rex really be the kind of dog that will stop these bikers? Stay tuned to find out what happens next. Sarah's steps were steady as she walked down the sidewalk, her cane tapping against the pavement. She had walked this path so many times, it felt like second nature. She could hear the birds singing, and the breeze was soft against her face. Rex walked beside her, his ears perked, his tail swinging gently as he moved with ease. They had a good rhythm, Sarah's steps guided by Rex, and Rex's movements perfectly in sync with hers. The world around them seemed peaceful, and everything felt just like any other day. But then, as they reached the corner, Sarah felt it. The atmosphere around them seemed to shift. There was a change in the air, and it made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. It wasn't a bad feeling, not exactly, but it was different, like something was about to happen. She couldn't see the group of bikers, but she could hear them. Their loud laughter and the sound of their engines rumbling told her exactly where they were. The group was hanging out at the corner of the park, blocking the path. She knew they were there before she even reached them. Sarah had learned to pay close attention to the sounds around her, and her hearing was sharper than most. She could tell they were all looking at her, even though she couldn't see their faces. Rick, the leader of the group, was the first to speak. His voice was loud and full of mockery. Sarah could hear the smirk in his voice. "Hey, lady, you lost or something?" Rick called out, laughing a little. His voice wasn't friendly. It was thick with sarcasm. Sarah didn't react. She just kept walking, one step after another. She had dealt with people like Rick before. People who thought they could take advantage of her because they assumed she was weak. People who thought they could bully her just because she was blind. She wasn't bothered by his words. She had heard them all before, and she knew Rex wouldn't let anything happen to her. Rex had been with her for a long time, and he knew exactly what to do when people acted like this. The bikers didn't stop there. Rick wasn't done. His friends behind him laughed, egging him on, probably thinking they were being funny. They thought Sarah was an easy target. They thought she couldn't defend herself, and they thought Rex was just a normal dog. "Go ahead, lady," Rick continued, his voice louder now. "You're not gonna bite me, are you?" He chuckled, and his friends followed suit. The bikers were trying to get a rise out of Sarah. They were trying to make her angry, or maybe they just wanted to see her get scared. But Sarah didn't flinch. She didn't say a word. She knew exactly how this would play out. She knew they had no idea who they were dealing with. She could feel Rex standing beside her, calm but ready. His body was tense, but it wasn't out of fear. Rex was always ready to protect. He had been trained for moments like this. And as Sarah walked, her confidence grew. She wasn't going to let Rick and his gang intimidate her. She had Rex, and Rex was no ordinary dog. They didn't know it, but Sarah and Rex were a team. A team that could handle anything. They didn't need to fight back with words. They didn't need to make threats. They just needed to show Rick and the others that they were messing with the wrong pair. As Sarah's cane tapped along the sidewalk, she could feel the distance between her and the bikers shrinking. She wasn't nervous, but she could tell that Rick and his friends were starting to get bolder. They weren't just laughing anymore. Now, they were stepping closer, trying to crowd her in. "Hey, I'm talking to you!" Rick called again, louder this time. "What's your dog gonna do, huh? You think he's gonna protect you? You really think that dog's gonna stop me?" Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her calmness was all the answer Rick needed, but he didn't get it. He kept pushing, getting closer and closer, as if trying to provoke her into doing something. "Come on, lady," Rick continued. "What's he gonna do, bite me? You can't even see me." His voice was full of laughter, but Sarah could hear the challenge in it. He was daring her to react. But Sarah was used to this. She had been blind her whole life, and she had dealt with people who thought they could take advantage of her, just because she couldn't see them. She wasn't about to let a group of bikers ruin her day. She had walked this path so many times before, and she wasn't going to let anyone stop her now. But the bikers didn't stop. They kept crowding around her, getting closer with every step. Sarah could hear them moving, shifting from side to side. She could feel their presence, but she didn't let it throw her off. Rex was still walking beside her, just as calm and collected as ever. One of the bikers, a younger guy with a long beard, reached out to touch Rex, probably thinking the dog wouldn't do anything. He was wrong. Before the biker could even get close, Rex turned his head sharply. Sarah didn't need to say a word. Rex's eyes were locked onto the biker's hand, and the dog growled low in his throat. The biker hesitated, his hand frozen in the air. He had no idea what to do next. Rick, still not realizing what kind of dog he was dealing with, chuckled and waved his hand. "What's wrong? Scared of a dog?" he mocked. Sarah didn't respond. She knew Rex wasn't scared. And she knew that if things went too far, Rex would step in. But she wasn't going to let it get that far. She wasn't going to let these bikers push her around. With one final look at Rick, Sarah took another step forward, walking right through the group of bikers. They parted slightly, unsure of what to do. They had underestimated her and they had underestimated Rex. They didn't know that Rex wasn't just any dog. He had been trained to handle dangerous situations. He had been through Navy SEAL training, learning how to protect and serve. What they didn't know was that the moment they started pushing her, they were pushing the wrong person. They didn't know that Rex was a warrior. Sarah's footsteps were steady and sure, but the bikers weren't done. They hadn't learned their lesson yet. As Sarah walked by, Rick took a few steps forward and called after her one more time. "Hey," he shouted. "You better watch out, blind lady. I might just have some fun with you." But Sarah wasn't worried. She didn't even turn to look at him. She just kept walking. She knew Rex had everything under control. Days passed, and each morning Sarah followed the same routine. It was her time to clear her mind. She loved walking in the park with Rex by her side. The rhythm of their steps helped Sarah stay focused. Rex was always there, guiding her through the world. And as they walked, Sarah took in the sounds around her. She could hear the wind in the trees, the chatter of people, the chirping of birds, and even the sound of her cane tapping against the ground. She never rushed her walks. They were calm, peaceful moments. But recently, something was different. Sarah could feel it. The bikers were around more often. At first, they just watched her, from a distance. They would snicker as she passed, laughing about how slow she was or how lost she looked. They thought she couldn't hear them, but Sarah had always been good at picking up on the little sounds. She didn't let them bother her, though. She knew how to ignore people who tried to make her feel small. But the more she walked, the more she noticed the group of bikers. It was the same ones every time. Rick, the leader, was always the first to speak. He was a big guy, loud and proud of it. The rest of the group followed his lead, laughing at anything he said, even if it wasn't funny. At first, Sarah didn't mind. She had been around people like them before, and she knew how to stay calm. But then, things started to change. Rick and his friends didn't just laugh from a distance anymore. No, they began to follow her. Every time Sarah walked through the park, they seemed to appear, almost as if they were waiting for her. Rick's taunts got louder and more personal. He would shout things like, "Hey, blind lady, you need help crossing the street, or is that dog really going to save you?" His friends would laugh, egging him on. Sarah didn't flinch. She didn't respond. She just kept walking. She had learned how to stay calm in moments like this. But inside, she felt something stirring. The tension was building, and she could sense that something was coming. She had been through tough situations before, and she knew that the more they pushed her, the more likely it was that Rex would step in. Rex had a way of sensing when things weren't right. Sarah trusted Rex completely. The bond they shared was unspoken but strong. Rex was more than just a guide dog to her. He was a protector. And Sarah had trained with him for years, learning to communicate with him without words. When things got tough, she could feel his energy shift. It was like a silent signal between them. They had each other's backs. And it wasn't just Rick. Every time Sarah passed by, the bikers would inch closer. It wasn't just teasing anymore, it was almost like they were daring her to react. One day, as Sarah walked past them, Rick stepped forward. He was getting bolder. Too bold. "Are you scared, lady?" Rick called out, his voice dripping with mockery. His friends laughed, and Sarah could hear the sound of their wheels rolling closer to her. "What's that dog gonna do, huh? Bark at me?" Rick's words stung, but Sarah didn't respond. She knew that responding would only give him more power over her. She could feel Rex's muscles tense beside her. She could hear the low growl coming from his throat. Sarah could tell that Rex was ready. Ready for whatever came next. But then, something shifted. Rick took another step forward, and this time, it wasn't just his voice that was coming closer. He was physically closing the distance. His boots tapped on the ground, and Sarah could feel the change in the air. He was getting too close. Too close for comfort. Without saying a word, Sarah gave a small command. Rex's ears perked up, and in an instant, he was in motion. His large paws pounded against the pavement, faster than anyone could expect. The bikers froze, unsure of what was happening. One moment, they were laughing, and the next, they were staring at the powerful dog who had stepped in front of Sarah. Rex didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply stood there, his muscles tense, his eyes locked on Rick. The bikers weren't sure if they should laugh or be afraid. It was as if the whole world had paused for a moment. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected the dog to move so quickly. They hadn't expected Rex to be anything more than a blind woman's guide. Rick looked at Rex, then at Sarah. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He wasn't sure what to say. For the first time, he was unsure. Sarah felt a small sense of satisfaction at that. She hadn't said a word, but she had made her point. Rex had made it for her. The bikers backed away slowly, not sure if they should push further. Rex stood his ground, his body still tense, his eyes never leaving Rick. Sarah could hear the hesitation in the air. They were starting to realize that they weren't dealing with a regular guide dog. They were dealing with something much more powerful. Rick took a few steps back, his smirk fading as he realized that things weren't as simple as he had thought. He had underestimated Sarah and Rex. He had thought they were weak, just an easy target for his jokes. But now, he wasn't so sure. Sarah continued walking, her cane tapping gently against the ground. She didn't look back, but she could feel the eyes of the bikers on her. Rex stayed by her side, calm once again. They had made their point. But the bikers didn't know the full story yet. They didn't know who Rex really was. And Sarah had a feeling that soon, they would find out. But for now, she was content to walk in peace, knowing that no matter what, Rex would always have her back. It was a hot afternoon when Sarah set out for her usual walk. The sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. She could hear the gentle breeze rustling through the trees and the soft chirping of birds in the distance. It was a peaceful day, just like any other. And yet, Sarah could feel the tension in the air. She had been walking for a while, and Rex was walking by her side, calm and steady as always. But today was different. Sarah could sense that something was about to happen. She didn't know why, but she just had that feeling. It was the same feeling she had learned to trust over the years, the feeling that something was wrong. Something was changing, and she was ready for it. As she walked, the sound of the approaching bikers grew louder. She had heard the rumbling of their engines for a while, and now they were getting closer. Sarah knew who it was before she even had to turn her head. It was Rick and his gang, the same group that had been harassing her for weeks. They were always there, lurking around, taunting her with their rude words and laughter. Rick's voice cut through the air as he and his friends drew closer. "What's wrong, lady? Blind and afraid of a little fun?" He laughed, his voice full of mockery. The others joined in, their laughter ringing in the air. Sarah didn't flinch. She had heard this before. She had heard it all, in fact. But today, something felt different. She knew Rex could feel it too. She could sense his muscles tense beside her, his body alert, ready for whatever came next. She knew Rick thought they were easy targets. After all, Sarah couldn't see the insults being thrown her way. And Rex, to most people, was just a guide dog, a companion to help her navigate the world. But Sarah knew better. Rex wasn't just any dog. And now, it was time to show Rick exactly who he was messing with. Sarah stopped walking. She stood still, her posture calm but firm. She let the sound of the bikers grow louder, closer. Rick and his friends were approaching fast, their voices growing bolder. But Sarah remained patient. She had learned how to wait for the right moment, how to trust her instincts. She gave Rex a small command. It was a command only he understood. And in that moment, everything changed. Without any warning, Rex moved. It was like a flash of lightning. 1 second, he was walking beside her, and the next, he was standing in front of her, his body tense and ready. His muscles rippled under his sleek coat, and his eyes locked onto Rick with a look that made even the toughest man stop in his tracks. Rex's movements were fast, too fast for anyone to catch. Rick froze as he saw Rex spring into action. The other bikers were taken aback, unsure of what was happening. Rex was no longer just a guide dog. He was something else, something fierce and powerful. In the blink of an eye, Rex had Rick cornered, his large body blocking the path. Rick stumbled backward, bumping into a tree as he tried to escape. But Rex was there, standing tall and strong. The dog's growl was low and threatening, a sound that sent shivers down Rick's spine. Rick's face drained of color. His cocky smirk disappeared, replaced by a look of fear. He had never expected this. He had never imagined that a dog, a guide dog, could do this. But here he was, trapped against a tree, with a dog that seemed to tower over him. Sarah stood still, her calmness only adding to the tension in the air. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't shout or get angry. Instead, she spoke quietly, but her words carried weight. "You don't know who you're messing with," she said, her voice steady and firm. "Rex here is a retired Navy SEAL K-9. He's trained for things you couldn't even begin to imagine." The words hung in the air, their impact undeniable. Rick stared at her, speechless. He didn't know how to respond. His mind raced as he tried to understand what had just happened. A retired Navy SEAL K-9? What did that even mean? He thought Sarah was just a blind woman, someone easy to tease and make fun of. But now, standing there, he realized he had made a huge mistake. Rex's growl didn't stop. It was a low, warning sound, one that made it clear, he wasn't going to let Rick or anyone threaten Sarah again. The other bikers stood frozen, unsure of what to do. They had been part of the bullying for weeks, but now they saw Rex for what he truly was. He wasn't just a dog. He was a force to be reckoned with. Sarah's voice cut through the silence again. "Rex has seen things. He's been through more than you could ever imagine. And he's not afraid to protect what's his." She stepped forward, standing tall beside Rex. "You've messed with the wrong person, Rick. And now, you'll see why." Rick took a step back, his eyes wide with shock and fear. For the first time, he wasn't in control. He wasn't the one calling the shots. Sarah had taken control, and Rex had shown them all what he was capable of. Sarah didn't need to raise her voice or shout. She didn't need to explain herself. The bikers could see it now. They could see the power that lay behind Rex's calm exterior. They could see the strength in Sarah's quiet confidence. Rick and his gang exchanged uncertain glances. They had thought they were the ones in charge. They had thought they could intimidate Sarah with their taunts and insults. But now, they understood. They weren't the ones calling the shots anymore. Sarah didn't wait for them to make the next move. She gave Rex a slight signal, and the dog stepped back, his body still tense but relaxed enough to allow Rick and his gang to leave. The bikers didn't hesitate. They quickly climbed back on their bikes, their engines roaring to life as they sped off, leaving Sarah and Rex in peace. Rick didn't look back. He couldn't. The memory of Rex's power, and the calm authority in Sarah's voice, would stay with him forever. As the bikers disappeared, Sarah exhaled softly. She felt a sense of relief wash over her, but she also felt proud. Proud of Rex, and proud of herself for standing firm. She turned to Rex, who was now walking beside her again, his body relaxed. Sarah smiled, knowing that no matter what came their way, they were ready. Together, they were unstoppable. The sounds of the bikers' engines slowly faded as they sped away, disappearing into the distance. The park, once filled with their laughter and taunts, was now quiet. The only sound left was the gentle rustling of leaves in the trees and the soft patter of Rex's paws on the ground. Rick, however, was still standing there, frozen in place. His body was stiff, and his face was pale, his once confident demeanor now replaced with shock and fear. He had never expected this. He had never imagined that a blind woman with a guide dog could put him in his place like this. He had thought he could bully and intimidate Sarah and Rex, but now, standing in front of her, he understood how wrong he had been. Rex stood by Sarah's side, his muscles relaxed now, but his eyes still watching Rick, making sure the message had been understood. Sarah, calm and collected, stood tall beside her dog. She hadn't shouted, hadn't raised her voice. All she had done was stand firm and let Rex handle the rest. It was the kind of quiet strength that left people speechless, and Rick was no exception. He had always been the one in charge, the one who made others feel small. But now, in front of Sarah and Rex, he was the one who felt small. As Rick finally snapped out of his daze, he took a shaky step back. He looked around, trying to find some sort of excuse for what had just happened, but there was none. He had been outmatched, outclassed by a guide dog and his handler. And he knew it. It wasn't long before the authorities arrived. A police car pulled up, and two officers stepped out, looking around to take in the situation. They saw Sarah and Rex standing calmly, and then they noticed Rick, still shaking, backed up against the tree. The officers walked over to him first, their presence demanding attention. "What happened here?" one of them asked, his tone serious but calm. Rick stammered, trying to come up with an explanation, but nothing he said made sense. He started talking about the confrontation, about how he had been joking with Sarah, how he didn't mean to cause any trouble, but his words just sounded hollow. He knew, deep down, that no matter how much he tried to explain himself, it wouldn't change what had just happened. He had crossed a line, and now he had to face the consequences. The officers listened patiently, then turned their attention to Sarah. "Ma'am, are you okay?" one of them asked gently. Sarah nodded, her calm demeanor never wavering. "I'm fine. Rex and I are used to these kinds of situations," she said, her voice steady. "But this time, it went too far. I think it's time for him to understand that people shouldn't mess with others just because they think they can get away with it." The officers nodded, agreeing. They knew that bullying, in any form, was unacceptable. And they could see that Rick had learned that lesson the hard way. "Rick," one of the officers said, turning to face him, "you're going to have to come with us." Rick stood there, his shoulders slumped, unable to argue. His pride had been shattered, and there was nothing left to say. He had harassed Sarah and Rex for weeks, believing they were easy targets. But now, the tables had turned, and he was the one who had to face the consequences of his actions. As Rick was led away by the officers, Sarah didn't watch him go. She didn't need to. She had already won. She had stood her ground, and now, Rick was getting exactly what he deserved. Rex, ever the loyal companion, walked beside Sarah as they continued their walk through the park. It was a familiar routine for them, one they had done countless times before. But today, it felt different. Today, the park was peaceful again. It was their space, and it always had been. No one, not even Rick, could take that away from them. As Sarah and Rex walked along the path, she could feel the weight of the moment slowly lifting from her shoulders. She had faced down the bullying, the taunts, and the threats. And now, with Rick gone and the park safe once again, she could finally relax. The air felt lighter now, filled with the sounds of nature and the peaceful stillness that had returned. The world seemed to have shifted, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what had just happened. She had stood up for herself, for Rex, and for everyone who had ever been underestimated. She smiled to herself, grateful for the bond she shared with Rex. He was more than just a guide dog. He was her protector, her partner, and her friend. Together, they had faced the worst that people had to offer and come out stronger on the other side. As they made their way to the park's exit, Sarah couldn't help but notice the change in the atmosphere. People who had once looked at her with pity now looked at her with respect. She had earned that respect, not by being loud or aggressive, but by standing tall and showing them that she was not someone to be taken lightly. And then, as they reached the park gates, something unexpected happened. A group of children playing nearby stopped what they were doing and turned to look at Sarah and Rex. One of the children, a little girl with a bright smile, walked over to Sarah. "You and your dog are amazing," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "I saw what happened. Rex is so cool." Sarah smiled warmly at the girl. "Thank you," she said, her voice kind. "Rex is my best friend, and we've been through a lot together. He's always got my back." The little girl's eyes widened in awe. "I want a dog like Rex when I grow up. A dog who's strong and can protect me." Sarah chuckled softly. "You're going to be amazing, no matter what kind of dog you have." With that, the little girl ran off to rejoin her friends, her words leaving a lasting impression on Sarah. She hadn't just taught Rick a lesson today. She had shown others, especially the younger generation, what it meant to stand up for yourself, to be strong in the face of adversity. As Sarah and Rex continued their walk, the park felt like a different place. It was no longer just a place where she had been harassed and belittled. It was a place where she had reclaimed her power, where she had proven that no one should ever underestimate her, or Rex, ever again. And with that, Sarah knew that this was only the beginning. There would always be challenges ahead. There would always be people who tried to bring her down. But as long as she had Rex by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. Together, they were unstoppable. As Sarah and Rex made their way down the familiar park path, the day began to feel just a little brighter. The sun was shining through the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. Birds were singing their songs, and the soft breeze blew through the leaves. It was a peaceful afternoon, one that felt different from the others. Today had been a day of change, a day when everything that had been building up in Sarah's life finally came to a head. She had walked through this park countless times before, but never like this. Never with the feeling of strength that now filled her heart. Sarah wasn't a person who needed attention. She didn't want to be seen as special or unique. She wasn't looking for praise or applause. All she wanted was the respect she deserved. She wanted to walk through life with dignity, just like everyone else. But sometimes, the world didn't make it easy. For weeks, Sarah had been dealing with the bikers who taunted her and made her feel small. They didn't know her. They didn't know her story, her struggles, or the bond she shared with Rex. To them, she was just a blind woman, a target for their cruel jokes. They thought they could get away with it, and for a while, it seemed like they might. But today, everything changed. Sarah had stood her ground, and in doing so, she had shown not only Rick but everyone else that you can't judge someone by what you see on the outside. People had underestimated her, thinking she was weak because of her blindness. But they were wrong. Rex, her loyal German shepherd, had been by her side through it all. He had been more than just a guide dog. He had been her partner, her protector, and her friend. He was a living reminder that sometimes, the strongest warriors don't look like warriors at all. They don't wear armor or carry weapons. They don't show off their strength in flashy ways. Instead, they show their power through quiet confidence, resilience, and loyalty. As Sarah walked on with Rex, she reflected on everything that had happened. She had fought not with her fists or with loud words, but with her calm and steady presence. She had fought with the strength of knowing who she was and what she was capable of. And in the end, that had been enough to make the bikers realize their mistake. It wasn't just about what happened with Rick today. It was about something bigger. It was about how the world often makes quick judgments about people, judgments based on appearances, stereotypes, or assumptions. People like Sarah and Rex, who don't fit the mold of what society expects, often face challenges that others don't. But that didn't mean they were any less capable, any less powerful, or any less important. Sarah's mind wandered back to the little girl who had spoken to her earlier. The one who had been so inspired by Rex's strength. She remembered the bright smile on the girl's face and the way her eyes lit up when she saw Rex. That moment had made Sarah feel proud. Proud of Rex, proud of herself, and proud of the message she had just shared without even trying. She had shown that strength doesn't always look the way people expect it to. Sometimes, it's quiet. Sometimes, it's calm. Sometimes, it's wrapped up in love and loyalty and patience. As Sarah walked on, she thought about the lessons she hoped others would take away from what had happened. She wanted people to know that no one should ever be underestimated, no matter how they look, how they walk, or how they speak. Strength comes in all forms, and sometimes the quietest, most unassuming people are the ones who have the greatest power. Don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't do, Sarah thought, as she walked on with Rex. And never forget that some of the greatest warriors come in unexpected forms. She didn't need anyone's approval. She didn't need anyone's validation. She had Rex, and together they had proven that anyone, no matter their circumstances, could stand tall and show their strength. That was the true power. Sarah looked down at Rex, who was walking beside her, his head held high, his steps steady and confident. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He didn't need to explain his past or his training. He was who he was, strong, loyal, and wise. And that was enough. As they continued their walk, Sarah thought about the future. She knew there would be more challenges ahead. There would always be people who tried to bring her down or make her feel small. But she was ready. She was ready because she understood something very important: strength wasn't about fighting. It was about standing your ground, staying true to yourself, and never letting anyone tell you that you couldn't achieve your dreams. The park, once a place of intimidation and fear, had become something new. It was a place where Sarah and Rex could walk without fear, a place where they had reclaimed their space and their dignity. And every time Sarah passed through those gates, she would remember today, the day when everything had changed. She smiled to herself, a quiet, knowing smile. She had faced the bullies. She had faced the world's judgments. And she had come out victorious, not because she had been stronger than anyone else, but because she had been true to herself. The world may have underestimated her, but they had learned that Sarah Turner was not someone to be taken lightly. And neither was Rex. As Sarah and Rex walked into the sunset, the air felt light, and the future felt bright. They had made a difference today. And that difference would echo in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed their strength. For Sarah and Rex, the battle had been won. But the message would live on forever.